So good morning or good afternoon to everyone. I am Stefano Bolognini, a member of the Italian Psychoanalytic Society, and my task is to be the moderator in this webinar organized by IPA Communication Steering Committee Chair Silvia Weinbuch and webinar coordinator Mariano Rupertuz, to allow IPA members to get to know in a more direct and personal way the candidates of the two presidential teams and the candidate for treasurer of our association. As you know, voting has already been ongoing since March 15 and will close on April 30. In order to make the best use of the time available, the candidates will not read their position statements today, and I will not read their complete CVs, which have already been widely circulated and can be revisited on the IPA website. Instead, they will present their ideas live in English, having 10 minutes each, while in the last half hour, they will respond succinctly with 3 minutes each to a complex pre-formulated question that will be put to them. There will be simultaneous translation to French, German, and Spanish. Please select the language in which you will hear the webinar. Santina Piazzese is showing the slide here with instructions for choosing the language. As this is a webinar, there will be no remote interventions. The sequence of the presentations will proceed alphabetically for the presidential teams, with the treasury candidates speaking in the central space between them. As moderator, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce these 5 very well-known, scientifically prestigious, and institutionally experienced colleagues. And I therefore begin by giving the floor to the first team, and specifically to Heribert Blass, who is a member of the German Psychoanalytical Association. Please, Heribert.
Yeah, thank you, Stefano. Thank you all for the invitation, and I'm very pleased to be here today and to talk about my intention to run for the office of the IPA president. And I would like to start by asking why I'm running for this office. I want to say that my motive is based on my overall personal and professional development as a psychoanalyst. And I think it's of great concern to me to contribute to the preservation and further development of international psychoanalysis, both to consolidate the essential importance of psychoanalysis for our contemporary global society and to continue to promote collegial exchange between us analysts from all regions of the world. I think the IPA provides an excellent thinking and working space for this dual orientation, the orientation, I think, inward and outward of the IPA, and which at the same time requires a complex and functional organizational structure. I consider the IPA to be a great benefit for all of us analytical colleagues, and I would like to contribute my experience and commitment to the further shaping of the IPA as our common international organization. Please let me say some words to my personal development, because from the age of 16, I was fascinated by Freud's writings and psychoanalysis. As an adolescent, I felt addressed both for my personal development and for understanding social structures. And at this time, I was 16, I bought a small booklet, and in which were printed an outline of psychoanalysis, as one article, and the other was Civilization and its Discontents. And this reading for me was a mental intellectual awakening. And Freud's language and thinking opened up answers to many unanswered questions that I had at this time. I personally was born 9 years after the end of World War II, and ever since I can remember the monstrosity of the Nazi crimes, the Holocaust, and the German Guild have always cast a shadow over my thoughts. And I kept asking myself how a nation, the nation that I was born into, could be capable of such crimes. And psychoanalysis was a way to understand more of this really incredible, monstrous atrocities. An important book at the time was in Germany, The Inability to Mourn by Alexander and Margarete Mitscherlich. And the Mitscherlich described the repression of guilt and grief in the frenzy of the German economic miracle. And their psychoanalytical approach also convinced me very much. Moreover, I have always been convinced that nationalistic thinking brings destruction and that a peaceful coexistence of people can only lie in the preservation of the international community. So from my, let's say, very beginning, I feel myself internationally oriented. After my medical studies, I completed my psychoanalytic training in the DPV, as Stefano said, first as an adult analyst and then later also as a child analyst. Then I had several offices in my society. I was president of my regional institute. I was director of training in the DPV. I was vice president of the EPF. And since 2020, I'm the president of the EPF. So I have several administrative tasks and organizing groups. I have published a number of articles, just to mention only a few, about the theme of the father in psychic development, relationships between inner and outer realities, issues on supervision, importance of framing and maintaining ethical boundaries in both analytic processes and institutions, impact of COVID-19 and questions of gender and transgender. And I'm currently also editing a book on time in the realm of the EPF. I mention these areas only in a sketchy way to make clear why I believe that I have sufficient qualifications for the office of the IPA president. In a way, for me, it's always a little bit difficult to advertise for myself, but by describing my understanding of the office, I think I might be able to illustrate this again. So I think first, the IPA president should have a rich clinical, theoretical, and scientific expertise in the now widely differentiated field of psychoanalytic theory and practice. And this should allow him to have an own point of view and working model, but also to remain open for the multiple working models of other colleagues and psychoanalytic cultures, how they can be found in the different regions of the IPA. It's the task of a president to keep open this stimulating field of international differences, but at the same time to take care for a common ground between all of them. So this is a movement back and forth, I think. I'm convinced that only mutual respect and acknowledging of differences can help to keep our international organization together. And I would like to take care for a corresponding atmosphere in our scientific congresses, meetings, and political discussions as well. So this is my understanding of a democratic leadership, how I would call it. And an attitude of democratic leadership would be my guideline together with my dear colleague, Katie Bogliato. I have already cooperated with Katie for 4 years in a previous EPF executive, and it was a very pleasant and constructive cooperation. In line with this, the president should have competence in administration and planning, as the IPA is now a big company with more than 12,000 members. And I think that my administrative experiences nationally and internationally allow me to have some trust in my competence. But according to the idea of a democratic leadership, the president of the IPA is only one of a group of members and international societies, of regional and interregional institutions, and of course of the board of the IPA. As president, I would work in an atmosphere of listening to others and of dialogue, because only dialogue and communication can help to preserve the Freudian legacy. This relates also to keeping together the different training models inside the IPA, which should continue their exchanges and dialogue. As director of training and organizer of end of training evaluation projects in the EPF and the IPA as well, I'm used to this essentially open dialogue in which all educational models and all styles of societies and members are recognized and deserve the same attention and value. Nevertheless, this does not exclude scientific discussion. This is clear. But we need a respectful discussion under the umbrella of the IPA. So I also think that the IPA must remain open to new emerging realities inside and outside the IPA. Preserving the Freudian legacy means to do what Freud always did himself. He dealt with new aspects of reality, he revised his theory, he lived and worked as a scientist and a kind of an artist with continued transformation processes. And to keep this legacy means to take on the same attitude, I think. I have described in our position statement together with Katie Bogliatto that we live in a world of accelerating transformation. And the current and the previous IPA presidents and boards have already organized a lot of projects that bring the IPA and our contemporary society and community together. And we, Katie and I, we want to continue with this process. We need further research projects on the different influences and outcomes of classical psychoanalysis in the consulting room, but also of remote or retail analysis. We need research projects on the impacts of different frequencies in the analytic process so that we can gain more empirical evidence about what we do. And we should include these aspects of research also in the training of psychoanalysis and in education, including findings of other sciences such as neuroscience. Interdisciplinary knowledge is important. We need a closer contact to university and university students again. And we should deal with the influence and meaning of new technologies on psychodevelopment. So what, for instance, assisted reproduction, questions of gender transformation, influence of artificial intelligence, this is also all very important. Katie and I, we want to emphasize the meaning of child analysis. This is something which is very important also for the future of psychoanalysis. And we want to protect and keep human rights, democratic rights. But whenever we give some political statements, we also have to take into account that we do not put colleagues in danger. So this is a short summary of what I want to say, and thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you. I think I've reached.
Thank you, Heribert, perfectly in time. Now I give the floor to Katie Bogliatto, who is a member of the Belgian Psychoanalytic Society. Please, Katie.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everyone. I'm also very honored to take part in this webinar and to share the ideas and to continue to share the ideas that Heribert has just began to share with all of you. My path is different. I've got a path to psychoanalysis, and my path to the international thinking of psychoanalysis is through my experience when I was a candidate with IPSO. So I wanted to share this in knowing that IPSO is also a very important moment of experience for the candidates, with different thoughts, different models, different colleagues coming from all different parts of the world and of the different societies that are part of the IPA. So we are also very eager in the attention we pay to be very careful to integrate in a transversal way as it has been going on more and more now during the past years, the integration of the candidates, which are the younger generation, and they also bring a lot of new ideas and thinking. Another main point that is also important about figuring out what IPA is, I managed to have an idea from what I call the core of IPA, having participated for 4 years, and my mandate will finish now in the Business and Finance Committee, in which we have a view of, when I say the core, of everything that is taking place in IPA on an administrative level, but on a scientific level, with the complexity and the big number of different committees, think tanks that exist. And this is also something that IPA can offer to all members. An important, so many projects are thought in these different think tanks and committees, that the importance of transparency, to share the scientific work that is done in IPA, is very important. One of the functions of the VP is a scientific function, and of course it will be to organize the scientific events, and this is the richness of IPA, the scientific way of thinking in a plurality way of thinking. And as Heribert just told us, it's important for us to try and to connect as best as we can the different models that exist and to hold them together. There's the Eitingon model, the French model, the Uruguayan model that is present in the different regions and in different continents of the IPA, that allow us to share clinical models and to share different ways of thinking and of thoughts. What's important, and we know that there have been and there are still many controversies within IPA, is that what has been brought at the front since we have been living the COVID pandemic and what we call the conflicts about teleanalysis and the training. Because one of the main also function of IPA is to transmit and to maintain psychoanalysis alive and to transmit the training in a very rigorous way, but also to take into account the change in the contemporary society and world we are living. So how could we think about teleanalysis? And the think tank is still going on, and we are waiting for the report of the think tank working on this subject, is that it may take time to understand better, but we will probably and surely we still need also to continue to work with other disciplines, such as neuroscientists, such as sociologists, to help us also better understand what is going on when we are in consultation online with our own patients. How can we do all this together in the different regions? How can we foster and emphasize? It's through a dialogue. And one of the functions of the president, of the vice president and the board is not only to discuss about, well, not only, of course, it is to discuss about main issues, but of course to try to do it in the best way one can, in an ethical way, in a respectful way, and to be in contact with the members who need to have more information. And the project that Harriet Wolf, the project that the previous boards have also started to communicate more with the members throughout the world, through webinars, through newsletters, through not only scientific events, but also organizing scientific events online, and with the creation of the Asia Pacific Conference, is to get more and more in touch with the members so that they can not only be enriched by the scientific thought and epistemological turning points in the models and in the clinical way of thinking, but that they can also feel that they are important. IPA is not only a society and association, but it cannot exist without its members. And the members are all psychoanalysts throughout the world and candidates. An important project is to continue to help younger generation to join societies, to understand what psychoanalysis is, to understand the richness of a psychoanalytic way of thinking and a model that can be, of course, that we do and we practice this in our everyday private consultation rooms, but it's such a rich thought and way of on different models that we can also have to foster and enhance community projects, meaning that it's so important to go outside from our consulting rooms and to show, to share, to help people in need. And there are so many projects that are already existing within IPA and still in need to continue to be funded. And this is when I want to talk about the finances, which is also a very important point of our project, is that, and Adela will share with us, of course, her project, but we are, Heribert and myself, very concerned to be careful, to take a lot of attention to the reality of the social, cultural, and economic situation that we can find in the different parts of the world. And this is an important task in order to see how can we also not only understand, but help by funds, by thinking about, of course, about the fee, of not augmenting the fee, not increasing the fee, but how can we also try to use in the better way we can the finances of IPA for psychoanalysis and for the members in a way that the members feel that it is used for them. I am arriving at the end of my 10 minutes and I leave my place to my colleagues and to Adela. Thank you for listening to us.
Thank you very much, Kathy. And as previously announced, in between the two presidential and vice presidential teams, we will listen to Adela Escardó, who is the candidate as the treasurer of the IPA. Adela Escardó is a member of the Peruvian Psychoanalytic Society. Please, Adela.
Thank you, Stefano. Well, good day to everyone. As you know, and Stefano has just said, so has Kathy, I'm running for treasurer in the IPA. It's a huge challenge, and I hope to work alongside with Harriet and Adriana, having had mentoring of Henk-Jan Delewitz, a very valuable experience, and with the collaboration of the board, the budget and finance, and the dues advisory committees, and a very, very efficient staff. I'm glad this is a coordinated work. Really, it's the only way. I would like to underline that the IPA, as of today, the IPA finances are in good health after, of course, much stress. However, we need to be very, very careful. We could say that the IPA is getting more and more vulnerable as we cannot raise dues anymore, and seeing that the inflation rates are very high. Last year, we could only raise $10 when we should have raised between 8 and 10%, which is the common inflation rate in many countries. We also know that there are much higher annual inflation rates, and that times indeed are very difficult. How will it be for 2024? We will really be keeping dues at the same level. We must know that keeping the pace with the inflation factor is not possible. So again, the IPA is at the moment in a healthy situation, but the finances going forward won't be easy to keep at this level. Another central thing is that as treasurer, together with a budget and finance team, we will take good care of the money the IPA has. Of course, we're not only thinking of keeping the money, but plan to administer it for the different activities of the IPA, for the development of a psychoanalysis, primarily for the benefit of its members, that there may be a balanced equilibrium between the budget and the possibilities of the organization. I know my position as treasurer won't be easy or pleasurable. And this, of course, makes me wonder why I'm taking it up anyway. We're expecting difficult times. And of course, the problem of me being Latin American and the expectations of Latin Americans, well, as I know, this is going to be difficult. Nonetheless, I am happy to address you here today. The IPA encompasses nearly 13,000 members from some 67 countries, all of which should make us very proud. We are committed to advance psychoanalysis all over the world and to foster participation and benefit among its members. Our aim is to help in a balanced, organized, and well-thought manner. As you know, the IPA has several fronts. One serves to promote a sense of belonging to an international community of psychoanalysts. Going forward, I envision the IPA as an improved and attuned functioning as a vigorous international working group. As you can imagine, due to its size and complexity, these tasks are far from easy to achieve. Nonetheless, a great deal of coordinated work is being done by each administration. The IPA has an internal front the organization to its members, and an external one, which involves reaching out to the general community. Our main identity as psychoanalysts is in clinical psychoanalysis. In view of that, we take much care in psychoanalytic education or training, research, in developing psychoanalysis in new places, facilitating international, interregional communication, etc. We help many colleagues around the world with varying interests to network and bring them together, and whose thoughts get to be shared in webinars, posts, and international congresses. We strongly value communications among colleagues and as an outreach tool. I have heard and read that many societies are having trouble with getting colleagues to assume leadership positions in their societies. This is an added value that we must work on. We need to think how to develop and fortify it if we think of the future of our society. And we need for younger analysts to understand its value. As we know, the IPA comprises 3 regions: North America, Europe, and Latin America. And a 4th region, the Asia Pacific, is being developed. Each region being different in history, culture, and needs. At times, differences make for opposing views and intractable conflict. We must draw upon our capacity to listen and think psychoanalytically. We're committed to respect and contain those conflicts, even if this way it gives way to tensions. We all make up the IPA. We should keep that in mind, and we must encourage participation of its members through its many committees and benefits. We must make sure we have a global perspective. I find the ways of problems are approached and discussed within the IPA to be a learning experience. Discussion calls for group thinking. It's never a matter of a single person decision. Some hot topics, for example, are training, remote analysis, dues, the IPA in the community and the world, today's violence and war, everyday life where othering is present, etc. How can psychoanalysis help in different fields beyond the clinical? I believe psychoanalytic thinking gives us an edge which sheds special light and may truly help. The treasurer takes part in all these conversations within the IPA. It's not only about finance, which is what most people seem to think. It's about sharing and analyzing several points of view, and of course, also about allocating and distributing our resources. In that way, taking proper care of the organization and of its members. The IPA is a microcosmos. Many times we reproduce the many problems we encounter outside. We are a members organization. There are many characteristics that bring us together, but others may arouse anger and conflict. These are all part of our human nature, as well as group functioning. I hope sound leadership may bring us to function as an international working group with a good rhythm despite its problems. Many thanks to all.
Thank you very much, Adela. Now we can go ahead with the second presidential and vice presidential team. So I invite Bernard Chervet to speak. Bernard is a member of the Paris Psychoanalytic Society. Please, Bernard. Yes.
To unmute me. Okay. That's good. So, dear colleagues, I am very honored to be here today with you all as a candidate of the IPA presidency. I have 10 minutes to convince you that I will be a good president. Rotro, the clerk, will then have to convince you of our choice to team up together. 3 points. What motivates my candidacy first? Second, what is my mindset for achieving the goals of the IPA? Third, how to promote psychoanalysis while taking into account the particularities of each region. My motivation: I am a psychiatrist and child psychiatrist and after psychoanalyst and child psychoanalyst. I myself have 5 children and I am married to a training psychoanalyst at the Paris Society. I became a psychoanalyst in order to participate in the knowledge of psychic life and to take care of my patients' psychic life as well as my own. At the same time, as I developed my clinical practice and my research work, I took an institutional responsibility within the governing bodies of the SPP. I have held all the positions concerning scientific life and research in psychoanalysis, and I have been vice president and then president twice. For the last 10 years, I have continued both these commitments by directing the International Congress of French-speaking psychoanalysts, which brings me into contact with many colleagues from all over the world. I have participated for 10 years now at the EPF and at the IPA in reflecting on institutional matters, which with the aim of improving the representativity within the IPA. For the last 4 years, I have been a member of the IPA board, and I am currently working in the executive committee. All these responsibilities have enabled me to meet and exchange with many colleagues in various countries. far from detracting from each other, these two areas of interest, the scientific work and the institutional commitments, continually potentiate each other. Over the last 10 years, I have met and discussed with many colleagues in Europe, of course, but I have also been invited to several CAPSAs in Latin America and worked in a CAPSA with North American colleagues. Many talked to me about the singularities of their regions, their centers, and their analytical cultures. We were able to compare our aspirations toward democracy, toward the evolution of our structures, toward the place of psychoanalysis in society, towards the different financial situation, toward the different political context. I understood how all this diversity is the basis of an extraordinary vitality that reinforces the value of psychoanalysis as a science of the unconscious and as a therapeutic method, but also as a discipline of thought that we can share throughout the world. Nothing to date has surpassed the capacity of psychoanalysis to account for the complexity of our psychic lives. Second, the mindset that drives Rotrot and myself. My reflections have thus turned to the correspondence that exists between the individual mental functioning and the democratic functioning of our institution that we wish to have. I am particularly keen to take advantage of the differences, contradictions, inconsistencies, and irrationalities that present themselves to us through the psychic lives of our patients, but also through our institution and through the world in which we live. Renouncing the erasure of differences and instead welcoming them within us is a mark of the psychoanalytic ethic. As with our patient, we must build our institution within ourselves as internal object. This requires time as well as committed frequentation of them. To lead the IPA, one must know it and have worked within it for years, integrating it step by step. Otherwise, the risk is to do it in a technocratic, bureaucratic way without taking into account its specific object, which is precious because it is fragile, namely psychic life. The IPA must, of course, keep to its original mission, that of being the guarantor of psychoanalytic science and its therapeutic method. To do this, it must ensure that the advances of psychoanalysis are shared and that excellent and rigorous training is provided. But the mission of the IPA has been enriched. It is also become a community of It has also become a community of psychoanalysts. The IPA offers us a group life as a complement of our solitary activity. No one can become an analyst by themselves, but equally, no one can become an analyst only through the institution. The potentiation between solitary and group activities is a source of our creativity. The IPA is also committed to the global concern for mental health. It is thus involved in world events. The diversity that makes up the IPA must be exalted. We want to support democratic principles through the dialectics of equality and difference, responsibility and delegation, transparency and confidentiality, respect of majority and minorities, whilst avoiding the tyranny of one or the other, divisions and split. 4, the involvement of the IPA and the need to take into account the particularities of each region. The IPA today is composed of 4 regions, each with its own originality and specificity. The organization of its board is based on the regions, as the representatives are elected by each region. The particularities of each region are thus highlighted, but there is a need to work on cohesion so that the IPA does not fragment into several regional IPAs. The IPA is a very different organization from the regional federation with its high degree of complexity. To lead it, an international perspective has to be gained by working within it. This consists of using the richness of this diversity, which largely exceeds that which exists within each region, in the service of the evolution of psychoanalysis and its practice in the world, and to bring together what is universal in psychoanalysis and what is specific to each culture region. My career and my responsibilities have made me familiar with the particularities of each region, each country, each organization, which concern their past, the social, financial, and political context. The fourth region, Asia-Pacific, is the latest to emerge. It is in full development. The involvement of its diverse cultures in psychoanalysis itself, in its theorization and practice, is full of exciting promise. Second, Europe is the birthplace of psychoanalysis. It remains very attentive to the specificities of psychoanalysis, both in its way of thinking and its transmission through training, the rigor of its standards. The clear differentiation between psychoanalysis and psychotherapy is a crucial point. Development since the Second World War was such as the market of the various treatment and offer, and the finances and the means of communication reinforced by the recent pandemic oblige us to work together to maintain this rigor and the flexibility linked to this development. The heterogeneity of the European society, the fact that the two major schools that have played a key role in the development of psychoanalysis are England and France, the existence of several training models, each with their own coherence, make Europe a very lively crucible and psychoanalytical thought. Currently, Germany and Great Britain have concrete responsibility within the IPA. France, Italy, and many other countries want to get involved in the international perspective. Latin America is full of novelty and specificities, as much due to its original contribution as to the organization of its federation linked to a country as Mexico and Brazil, and to the role of Latin America with FEPAL, the project that strengthens the links between the various Latin America culture to create a Latin American platform is an exciting project. North America also has its own original feature. It benefited from a large number of immigrants in the last century and has developed its own ways of thinking. An organization with two federations, APSA, which is part of the IPA, and NAPSAC, which brings together the Independent Society, Canada, and various ASEAN societies. The place of each is evolving fast. My personal encounters with various centers, both in the US and Canada, have familiarized me with the fertility and dynamic heterogeneity of North America that is concerned to maintain psychoanalysis as a clinical method and as a cultural work. All these particularities are also to be found within IPSO, this breeding ground for future talent, this nursery that is already shaping the future of the IPA. The structural links between the IPA and IPSO will be the subject of joint reflection. To conclude, I would like to recall that one point unites us all, our sensitive experience of the tendency that inhabit our unconscious minds, the fact that we have all experienced the capacities of psychoanalysis to have an influence on our symptomatic beings. We are therefore sensitive beings who can help our patient benefit from this knowledge. These units us deeply. If psychoanalysts do not take care of psychic life, their own and that of their patient, no one else in the world will. It is this concern that we will support within the IPA, in continuity with those who have had this exciting responsibility, in continuity with their intense work, in which I was able to participate with Stefano Bolognini, Virginia Unger, and Harriet Wolf, and many other colleagues involved in the IPA. I would like to thank them, as well as all the friends and the colleagues who accompanied me during my journey, all the members who trusted me, and already all those who will trust me and vote for me. Thank you for voting.
Thank you. Thank you, Bernard. And we have now give room to Rotraut Hélène de Klerk, who is a member of the German Psychoanalytical Association and runs as vice president. Please, Rotraut.
Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to have the space to present my thoughts to you. I present myself as a designated vice president in a team with Bernard Gervais, who is designated president of the IPA. We form a strong team, bringing in knowledge from a multifaceted, multicultural, multilingual perspective on important psychoanalytic issues to put them to debate with you, the members. We share the view that today's burning social matters, the war, migration, sufferings, can be looked upon not only from a humanitarian, but from a genuinely psychoanalytic perspective. It is this special competence to investigate the influence of the unconscious in all areas that makes us different from all other academic disciplines. Freud formulated that, I quote, "The use of analysis for the treatment of the neurosis is only one of its applications. The future will perhaps show that it is not the most important one." You're all very familiar with this formulation because it is on the front page of the IPA. Time has shown, however, that the clinical application of psychoanalysis has remained most important and most needed. It represents the cornerstone of a scientific orientation that combines the cure with research. However, it is my view the investigation into the cultural field is likewise important. Undertaking research into culture and cultures in the plural. Growing up in India, for example, is very different from growing up in Finland. The IPA has to take this into consideration very much for the activities in the future. Psychoanalysis is at the roots of culture, and culture is at the roots of psychoanalysis. This is my credo. The idea of an inseparable relation will secure the survival of psychoanalysis in all times. Psychoanalysis will be always needed to understand ourselves. It has its origins in a common myth, the Oedipal myth, taken up by Freud as a valid model for parallel individual development and that of civilization on the whole. Clinical and theoretical competence should therefore be complemented by the narrative as representing a third. Telling stories about how it is and how it has been is in a central position for psychoanalysis since, to quote from the introduction of Don Quixote, the very first modern novel by Cervantes, the history of literature is the history of our human knowledge. My first motivation to apply for the function of the vice president is to serve the IPA to be and remain in the future a strong cultural and political force in the world. The only one organization of this size to recognize fully the impact of the unconscious in all and every sectors of society. The largest representation of psychoanalytic thinking in the world. To think into the future of psychoanalysis, we need the visions and the institutions to promote them. I am, as vice president, potential vice president, prepared to learn, and to learn how best to do this from an organizational point of view. together with you, the members, and my team partner, Bernard Charvet. From the point of the content of psychoanalysis, we have to see what is being brought to us from the members of all regions. But we can also bring in our ideas. One contemporary focus, to my mind, has to be on the ever-changing variations of the psychosexual that we observe in the young people today. Only good and strong institution as the IPA, supported by its members, can provide the adequate container to investigate, research, and hold together the increasing diversity in this field. I think we are privileged with our science as well as our organization in the IPA to make an important contribution to this aim. A second motivation to apply for the office of vice presidency comes from my international orientation that originates in my childhood, enabling me today reading and writing and publishing in several languages. Being a born German by historical coincidence, I learned to understand the fabrics of nationalism, prejudice, racism, the politics of splitting and propaganda. Now, I intend to fuel my understanding of these political mechanisms that led into an eclipse of human values, and to serve the IPA to help overcome such damaging forces in societies. Telling history in narratives, and at the same time, developing theoretical models, putting together history and psychoanalysis, that is thinking, feeling, and working through, could be a model for the future. People feel increasingly in need to relate the experiences, but they don't easily find the right channels. Psychoanalysis can provide a scientifically founded frame. Psychoanalysis is the ideal field to cater for this need, and it is a challenge, but also a chance to position psychoanalysis back in the center of our society. To be more concrete regarding my cultural activities within the IPA so far, I have worked in 2 international groups, being the chair of the Literature and Psychoanalysis group of the IPA, of the EPF for many years, and consultant to the Culture Committee of the IPA for 2 terms. During this time on the Culture Committee, we have been editing 2 books, one short story book and one on short essays, written by psychoanalytic colleagues across the regions. An immensely fruitful endeavor. Reading through more than 100 articles and essays has given me insight into the personal expectations, concerns, worries, anxieties, but also to the joys and loves of the members, my analytic colleagues within the IPA. We do possess a treasure of creativity, but we also do have a lot of concerns on identification with what method, what school, what theoretical orientation, on orientation in the area of new sexualities, on the place of aggression and how to channel it, ethical questions, the value of honesty, for example. Further areas of concern are in training, the unconscious use of the body. A person who has researched on this is Donora Pines, who has been my supervisor for many, many years. Further, the question, is sexuality disappearing? Is it so in all regions? Is it different? What are the causes? Then young women, the transition from girlhood to maturity, the autonomous development of the body creating anxieties. And young boys, the frightening effects of internet pornography accessible to them at young age before a more secure concept of the mature genitals has been established. Regarding the IPA as an institution, I take up the wish from some of the representatives for more direct communication between the presidency, that is the board, with the members. There's a wish for flat hierarchies the special fostering of candidates with limited financial means. We do not want a psychoanalysis for the rich. We recognize the upsurge of social tensions as an outcome of social inequality. I would want to promote interdisciplinary research, for example, on what is love and on the psychophysiology of hunger related to the problems of migration. But last but not least, I would also like to maintain the importance of a sense of humor within a large institution. Amongst the immense quantity of his contributions, Freud dedicated one paper to the function of humor, an important one. I think he did well to bring this also to us. I thank you for listening to me.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Rotraut. We have now more or less 1.5 hour more, which will be available for the final question to the panelists. This time, we will reverse the order of the interventions by starting alphabetically from last to first. So Rotraut will be again the speaker in this new order. I want to present the question. The question is, what do you think members and candidates will demand from IPA in the coming years? And what might their expectations be? What do you think the future of psychoanalysis will be? Answering such a big lot of questions is an impossible mission for all of you. Nevertheless, we have to dedicate 3 minutes only, each of you, for answering. So, Rotraut, you are going on with your intervention, trying to answer these impossible questions. Thank you. The audio.
Okay, now, yeah. I can say that already some answers were in my text that I just presented. And since it is very recent that I talked, I hope that they're still on your minds. But what I could say is, what I'm really concerned about, I say it again, is the fate of young women who resort to the social media for help on their many problems. And I should think that we make it a special area for the IPA to make it our concern that they find better help and easier help with psychoanalysis. Maybe we have to think about creating a special design or a special pathway so that they find the way to us, to psychoanalysis, which does not have a high threshold to overcome. I dare to say in this context that for some of the young, the new media, using the new media for consultations can be a great help because it lowers the threshold of personal exposure. I will not go much more into the very difficult debate on the application of internet, or as you now call it, remote analysis, but I would like to bring this in as the answer to one of the questions. What might the expectations be? I have already mentioned that also the expectation would be that psychoanalysis turns to this critical phase in development between girlhood and young womanhood, which is under such pressure nowadays that institutions as a church, for instance, has lost its impact, who have given guidance.
We lost Rotraut. She disconnected incidentally, probably. But unfortunately, Rotraut is out of the connection, and we ended also her time available. So I give the floor to Bernard at this point. Please, Bernard.
Thank you again. Yes, as we have a short time, I will be able to speak slowly. Okay. When I heard first this question, I exclaimed, "Oh my God, what a desiring questions." My first response is one of the modesty. No one has the monopoly on the future. How did Freud and our predecessors do when the Second World War broke out and nearly wiped out psychoanalysis and psychoanalysts? How did they do when the pandemic ravaged the world? How our colleagues do when they are under totalitarian regimes and wars? We all adapted, and we fought the forces that drive us and our practice with our patients. We have invented new ways of working at the service of psychic life, at the service of our patients. It is the duty of the IPA to encourage these developments. If no one has the monopoly on the future, we nevertheless have our wishes. From my exchanges with colleagues, I have learned that many members and candidates wish to have the best scientific network through the IPA and to share ideas and research. I will therefore make sure that the IPA supports all such initiatives. I would also say that the future of our discipline depends on the development and the involvement of all members and candidates in the IPA. What I will try to do, if I am elected, is to maintain very high standards without losing our specificity, originality, and flexibility to be able to welcome new types of clinics and patients and let them benefit from our listening and our method. Ultimately, the success of our association will depend on its ability to understand and respond to the changing needs of its members and of the patients, while remaining true to its mission and core values. Certainly, psychoanalysis will evolve, as well as all other sciences. Psychic life is a reality, a precious reality that will create new methods to continue its development, growth, and care by following its specific process, the two stages process of the après-coup. IPA will have to evolve under the influence of the life needs of our psychic realm. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bernard. Now, Adela Escardo, please present your ideas about the questions.
Okay, thank you, Stefano. Well, about the first question, I think this question tells us something about our contradictory human nature, because on the one side, I think members demand guidelines on certain matters from the IPA, for example, on training, on the matter of remote analysis. They demand concrete answers and suggestions. And the organization takes up these subjects, these matters seriously, and, for example, appoints a special force to research the subject, also the Committee on Education. Societies then collaborate significantly with their opinions in meetings of societies, present their views in various online meetings around the world. However, if after the IPA says, okay, here are the guidelines for this, then the next instant, many protest and say they will do differently than advised. Is this something about ambivalence toward authority? Really, we are complicated beings, as we all know. We must keep thinking and working while we do so. And about the second question, about the future of psychoanalysis, I would hope psychoanalysis could be strongly present as a recognized, creative, critical, and also conciliatory voice, able to intervene in helping people in clinical psychoanalysis, as well as in other fields where social conflict is present. All our efforts should aim at this goal. It is crucial that the generations of analysts be able to cross-nurture among them to assure that experience and vitality combine enthusiastically in our profession. In recent years and in the present day, we can appreciate the considerable energy that candidates and members display in order to put psychoanalysis to work, per se, and with other fields of interest. Concern for the other is adamant. We can have a glimpse of it, of those efforts, through the social media. This desired potent voice is becoming a reality already. We can see a great deal of dedication and compromise in the younger population of candidates and members mostly. As for me, I am in awe of them. And this is what I would say. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Adela. Thank you to you. Now it's up to Kathy to present her ideas about these difficult questions. Please, Kathy.
Thank you. Well, my ideas to these two questions you asked us, Stefano, will be trying to answer in a very open way concerning the expectations for the coming years from members and or candidates or members in training. Their expectations are also linked to how to understand better what is the richness of IPA. So it's also linked to the mission of to continue the mission that the previous boards have already begun to be in contact more and more with members and having projects in the community. But I've got a word that comes is that the connectivity, the connection, connecting people and making members and candidates have the experience of the richness of the connection between members of the IPA, which is due to the fact that we all share a common ground of a clinical interest, of epistemology, of different models of theory, of thinking, and that we are also expecting to have more creativity, and this creativity comes also with the experience of working with our colleagues and listening and enriching ourselves and enriching our colleagues with different modes of thinking. So this is some ideas for the first question. And the second question concerning the future of psychoanalysis is also linked to not only the future of the transmission of the training of psychoanalysis, but also to the fact that psychoanalysis is a science that cannot be disconnected with society, with cultural events, with political events, with progression in technology. And so I hope, and I think, and I really, yes, hope that we are going to continue to learn more about what's going on in the world. And because also our main concerns are to help people in an ethical way and to help people understand themselves. So I think that the future of psychoanalysis is there, is an open future, but not easy to transmit it in the community. So it's also linked to how to help younger generations to approach psychoanalysis and to be aware of the richness of this tool that we share together. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. A moment. Okay, thank you, Katie. Heribert, your comment to the questions, please.
Thank you very much. I also can only give some ideas to these difficult questions, but for the first, and at the same time, of course, very open questions, I think that the members and candidates want, on one hand, that the IPA offers to preserve the foundations of psychoanalysis in the sense of Freud, but at the same time, and this relates a bit to what Leda said to my mind, they also want, of course, a connection to the current scientific and social developments. So I think it's both. And I would find for this task, I think the image of I would call it enabling container. The IPA, I think, according to my ideas, what the members and candidates think, and which corresponds, of course, to my idea, is the IPA is an enabling container as an organization which holds colleagues together and at the same time opens up for diversity, different thinking, and coming to the point of diversity, I think there's also an expectation that the IPA should be more open. The process already started, also for those people and colleagues who are coming from populations which are not in the IPA and analysts represented so far today. I think especially thinking of Latin America and also of the United States, people of color, that they come more in our organization. So this is one aspect. The other aspect, of course, is money. Katie has already said it, that the IPA should also take care for the different economical situations and differences, and that we should keep this in mind. So this just as a short idea, and with respect to the future of psychoanalysis, I think it's very important that we don't agree to the term, what Herbert Marcuse once had said. He spoke of aging of psychoanalysis or outdated of psychoanalysis. In Germany, das Veralten der Psychoanalyse. And I think this is something, if we combine our scientific research in the consulting room together with research also as an empirical studies, as just, for instance, the research on chronic depression has been done by Marianne Lotzinger-Bolliger, that the combination of both aspects is presented. This is something where psychoanalysis will be very important in the future, in connection also with activities in the community, as has been happened during the pandemic, where a lot of analysts have been working in the community, and to see that analysts are present not only in their consulting rooms. They are in their consulting rooms, of course. It's very important to be there to offer clinical help, but also to be in the community and to connect with the other sciences. I think when we combine all this together, I am very optimistic, I think, for the future of psychoanalysis. This just is a short, very dense idea.
Thank you very much, Heribert. I have to say that all speakers were so perfect and correct in their timing that we are now we have time more for a further discussion, but frankly, I, as the moderator, feel unprepared to let them speak more, also because the distribution of the time each of them would be very, very difficult. So I want first to thank the speakers for the generosity and spontaneity and depth of their contributions. I feel sure that the attendants to this webinar had the opportunity not only to explore more and more their ideas, so well formulated, but also to meet them as persons and to appreciate the way they are able to communicate with us. Gratitude is my personal feeling, but I feel sure it's shared by the audience today. Secondly, I would like to invite all the attendants to encourage all colleagues of the IPA to vote, to participate fully and actively in this election, like in the future events, because we as a community are involved, are responsible, and are interested and excited by the quality and level of these contributions. Then finally, I would like to thank, besides the speakers and the organizers, also the attendants who are also, in fact, important messengers and contributors to this IPA internal working through. I want to thank the panelists, the remote audience, and best wishes for a thoughtful vote and a good weekend. We hope to meet all of you in the Cartagena Congress. So many thanks and many greetings. See you.
See you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.